Hey everybody, welcome back to Drew the Catholic. Today, just want to do a quick video. It's been a while since I've posted anything. Been kind of busy, but I wanted to start doing some shorter content that's just a little easier to digest. Been really busy with work, and there's a couple other things in the works that I have going on. So, I was like, we could start doing just some reflections on gospel readings, other things I'm thinking about, stuff like that. And that's what we're going to start doing today. So, I was doing the daily readings this morning, and this verse from 1 Corinthians chapter 1 has just been sitting with me this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and read it and just share with you some of my thoughts. Brothers and sisters, Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, and not with wisdom or human eloquence, so that the cross of Christ might not be emptied of its meaning. The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the learning of the learned I will set aside. Where is the wise one? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made the wisdom of the world foolish? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not come to know God through wisdom, it was the will of God through the foolishness of the proclamation to save those who have faith. For Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are called, Jews and Greeks alike, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. It's just something interesting. When we read this today, there might be some confusion of like, well, first off, we know God's not foolish, right? Paul's kind of using an image there that God's not foolish, but some of the things he does seem foolish to us. And God's not weak, but even what appears as weakness to us is actually his greatest strength, right? And there's also the sense in which, the cross is a stumbling block. Well, we see crosses everywhere today. I mean, on every church, they're on buildings. There's courthouses that have crosses and Christian imagery and 10 Commandments on them. People wear the cross as a necklace. Secular people put it on clothing. It's a normative symbol in our Western culture. That wasn't always the case, though, was it? I think one thing that's really important to remind ourselves of is this was a Roman execution device, the cross. It was a sign of humiliation. It was something they reserved for really heinous crimes to embarrass and humiliate people. It was an excruciating death. The word excruciating comes from cross. That's how bad it was. It was horrible. And they perfected it, right? The Romans perfected crucifixion. So in the context of the first century, being crucified was a horrific, embarrassing, humiliating death. And you were put on display in your humiliation. That was kind of the point of it, is to make a symbol of you and to make you look weak and to say, this is what happens when you oppose Rome. This is what happens when you get in our way, right? And what a perfect thing for God to use, right? The very boastful testimony of Rome's vicious power is their undoing. The very act of not just torturing someone and killing them, but belittling their character and embarrassing them and making a mockery of them while doing it. There's so many grotesque evils all wrapped up into that one act. And of course, in the subversive wisdom of God, that's the exact thing that undoes death, the devil, evil, sin, slavery. All this is the paradigm of the gospel in many ways. And it runs contrary to what we want as humans naturally. And that's not to say, this verse says that it's a stumbling block to the Jew and foolishness to the Greek. It's not to say that it's an unreasonable thing and against reason, right? We know that God is reasonable. Everything is compatible with reason. And we also know that the gospel, that the new covenant is the fulfillment of the old, and it's, to the Jew first, then to the Greek. We see that in the New Testament as well. So what is Paul saying here, if not that what God will often be doing is going to be surprising to us, and the way in which it upsets us or causes an upset or causes confusion or scandal, right, is the means by which he's actually accomplishing his purpose. For the faithful Jew, the Messiah they wanted was one who would not be killed by Rome on a cross, but would march into Rome victoriously with a giant army and, make them cower at his feet. To the Greek, they didn't want some scandalous, violent display of divine love in such a way. They wanted something that was wise and maybe, just merely philosophical. Perhaps they wanted it to be more Gnostic in nature. They wanted to debate it, but maybe not have it become so real or incarnational. It could just be an idea that lives in our head. And certainly not one that calls us to think about the gravest sins of our society as it affects people whom we don't like, in the form of crucifixion. It'd be nice if we could just keep those to philosophical debates, and that was the wisdom of God we were talking about. And then, it doesn't get too involved in what my government's up to in terms of how it oppresses its enemies, right? And yet, the very single act of the crucifixion resists and opposes all of these forces. The temptation of the first century Jew to want a zealot Messiah, and the temptation of the Greek to merely keep the philosophical and its nice debate-oriented boundaries, and maybe not let it leak out into public life or how we treat our neighbor or how we treat those who are different than us. And yet one singular act of God can resist and oppose the evil in both camps. It also flips on its head the idea of suffering, the idea of embarrassment and humiliation. And, as Catholics, we're very familiar with redemptive suffering. For us, this is a big part of our faith. It's one of the best parts of our faith. And yet, as I'm reading this verse in today's world, there's a lot of temptation, for me at least. I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for you, to say, God, do we not have to go through this, please? Maybe the world's getting kind of crazy. It's not becoming as fun to be Catholic anymore. There's a bunch of things that my society supports on both sides that are, gravely evil. Can we just not do this? Can we just fix that and make it comfortable for me, please? Why are things getting worse? That's a temptation of mine. And yet that's the exact place where God's going to make an opportunity for something good to happen, for something unexpected, for something that is foolishness to the Western man and maybe scandalous to the Eastern man. I don't know. I'm not going to off the cuff try to modernize the image here, but this is often how God works. If you think about a lot of the great saints, a lot of the things they did with their lives at the time were crazy to the church. And people were like, and then later it's like, well, this was an act of God. And it was, and it needs to be that way. We need to be prudent still. I'm not saying like, don't be prudent and just do crazy things and just use this verse as justification for it. But this is often how God works, in unexpected ways that are seemingly contrary to what conventional wisdom would say is good, and which are offensive to the paradigm of the age. And I think that's the main thought I'm having here as I'm reading this verse. It's offensive to the paradigm of the age, the paradigm in Jewish culture of the zealot Messiah, and the paradigm of Roman culture in terms of their love affair with philosophy, but also their strong, very, violent military, the way that they subdue their opponents and enculturate them and keep them at bay, Pax Romana. The cross is offensive to both of those paradigms. And so what that has me thinking is we live in a culture now where the cross is, well, for a long time it wasn't offensive. Maybe soon it will be again. Maybe soon it will be offensive again to even have an image of a cross. Probably not for the same reasons it was in the first century. Probably because it represents morals and religion and truth and being responsible for your actions and being accountable to a higher power. Because it represents Christ, right? That might be why it becomes offensive in the future, or maybe already is offensive in some places. But we live in a culture where the cross, which was an offense to the Jew and to the Greek, has become a staple of our culture. It's become the center of our culture. You know, in medieval villages, the church was the center, and atop the church was a cross. The church itself was likely built in the shape of a cross. The impact of Christianity changed the orbit of human society, at least in the West, and that's had an impact on the world for thousands of years now. And yet all that's shifting. All that's shifting. So now the question is, and this is not necessarily something I have an answer to in this podcast. Maybe I have some thoughts, but not an answer. But it's a question for all of us as Catholics. If God destroys, as this says, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the learning of the learned I will set aside. Where's the wise one, the scribe, the debater of the age? Has not God made the wisdom of the world foolish? Where's our scribes and our debaters today? What sort of wisdom are they propagating? What's the paradigm of the age to which the cross is offensive? There's lots of things I could rattle off. I mean, our ideas about hyper-individualism, our ideas about, this sort of libertine freedom where there's just pure choice and no imposition upon my choice. Ideas about all sorts of public issues, whether it be related to pro-life issues or, the way that we rule and govern ourselves, the laws that we pass. That all sorts of those things might be wisdom of the age that the cross is offensive to. And yet none so more than the idea of just Jesus Christ as Lord of the universe, as King. Jesus Christ is King, right? A culture that had once centered itself on the centrality of the cross as its source of meaning and its source of life has fallen from that, almost slowly, as if we were, lulled to sleep and it was taken from us in the middle of the night, which is interesting given the gospel reading for today, which is about a lampstand not losing its oil. And yet, I think oftentimes in cultural paradigms and in big sort of bird's eye view historical movements, it seems that we are in an age in which we have let our lamp run out of oil. We have fallen asleep at midnight when we should have been keeping watch, assuming that the centrality of the cross in the West would keep things as they ought to be. And, like in all the great ages of the church, if there was a period of scandal and corruption, it would be followed by a period of renewal. And now we're sitting here going, where's the renewal? Where's the renewal of our culture? It seems to be decay. The culture that was built on the centrality of the cross has now become a culture in which the cross is maybe already offensive to the wisdom of the age. We're without oil in our lamps. And that is the gospel reading of the day. I just kind of made that connection as I was thinking here. So for the church, this is our moment to be on watch, to fill our lamps with oil, to be awake at midnight. Because it is dark. The darkness is all around us in every facet of life. It's palpable, whether it's politics, whether it's cultural issues, whether it's global issues, whether it's church issues. There's a lot of darkness, and yet this is particularly when this paradigm of God undoing the foolishness of the age, which seems wise to us, and he does it through the cross. He does it through an oppositional paradigm. And it's kind of funny because in America we have this idea of rebellion ingrained in our bones, in our culture. Like we were a rebel people. That's how we founded our country. And yet now the idea of rebellion is boring. It's commonplace. Everybody's a rebel. Everyone is in the rebellion of their own individualism, which has become this isolating, crippling enslavement to your own passionate desires, which are there really most often to destroy you, not lead you into greater freedom or liberty. And that narrative has been undone by its own flaws, and true rebellion now is adherence to the principles of God, the wisdom of God, the gospel, the foolishness of the gospel, right? In which you care not for yourself, but you love your neighbor and your enemy, in which you don't look after your own needs, but someone else does, and you take care of theirs, right? Where you don't care for your own life, but give up your life so that you may gain eternal life. Like this is all opposed to the paradigm of our age in many ways. And there's lots of ways in which Christianity, full force Christianity, not watered down Christianity, not neutered Christianity that's just gushy with no consequence and doesn't require any transformation or change in you. That watered down, LaCroix Christianity is not going to do it anymore. We've played with that for 100 years now in the West. It's been the undoing of the West. But true Christianity, where you bear your cross daily, where you die to yourself, where you make your body a living sacrifice for the Lord, a temple worthy of bearing his Eucharistic presence in when you receive him at Mass, that Christianity is an oppositional paradigm. And not because it's macho and rises to meet the challenge and, wants to beat people up, but because it has teeth to it. It has real teeth to it. It's the truth. It's the power of God, the wisdom of God to save. This is what Catholicism is. It's the very life of Jesus Christ transmitted to us through the church, and it makes us truly united. I mean, you want to talk about the united human family. The way to unite the human family is in the Catholic Church. The way to bridge gaps across cultures without just making them this homogenous, cultureless vat and vacuum, and also without, without making their differences oppositional and violent. That's Catholicism. That's what it's done for 2,000 years, right? The message of the cross, this verse says, is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved is the power of God. And even recently, there's been so many things. This year has been crazy, right? There's been so many things that have happened where it's tempting to go, man, like it's really getting wild out there. Like, what are we going to do? And I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not trying to be like some prophet and predict what's going to happen, but I have a sense, and I've had a sense about me for a while, that it's only going to get more uncomfortable to be truly Catholic. It's only going to get more uncomfortable to have the church's position on abortion, IVF, on how we treat our neighbor and the foreigner and sojourner among us, how we view, issues of theology, but not just theology, issues of biology, issues of, sexuality, marriage. And those are just like the tertiary impacts of the faith, right? What about issues of, Jesus Christ's divinity? What about the exclusive claim of the Catholic religion that like this is true and everything else is not? And yeah, we can have a discussion about it, and God's mercy is exceedingly beautiful, and who can understand that? But like, dude, this is the path. If you want to be truly saved, like this is where you got to be. We live in an age where none of that is tolerated. And right now it's just socially awkward, right? In most places. In some places it's already, Nigeria, for instance, to be a Christian is a death sentence. But in the West, it's just a social death sentence, maybe. And yet not fully. I mean, I'm still running a business and have a normal job. And there's definitely some people who think I'm weird because I post videos like this. And there's definitely some people who have stopped talking to me because I talk about this so much. But will I find joy in it getting worse or harder? Like St. Paul did, like Christ did, like the apostles did, like so many saints before us did, like so many people in the world and other parts of the world do today. Will I remember that the message of the cross is the power of God to me who is being saved? It might be foolishness to the world. It might cost me everything, but I've actually gained everything in it. And you know what the funny thing about it is? When your answer to that is yes, like I will, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm sold out for it, regardless of the consequences for, my life, and even just the continued normalcy of my life. When your answer to that is, yep, I'm on board, Lord. That's what transforms culture. That's the sort of oppositional paradigm that the gospel in the first century embodied. That's the sort of stubborn adherence to the saving power of God in the message of the cross and the gospel that converts the Roman Empire. This is what's funny about it. The Zealots thought that Jesus should have been a crusader Messiah, that he should have marched up to Rome with a giant angel army and just stomped them under his feet. And yet he did crusade Rome. But he did it with martyrdom and love and the Roman Empire converted to Christianity. It took 300 years, and there were no swords drawn on the side of the Christians. The swords were drawn against them, and their blood was shed in that city and in other cities in the empire for 300 years. And then we get the Edict of Milan, and then shortly after that, we have a Christian Roman Empire. And that leads to the foundations for all of Western civilization. So Jesus did accomplish what the Jews wanted from the Messiah. The cross was a stumbling block, but it doesn't mean they didn't get what they want. They just didn't get what they want in the way they wanted it and in the timeline they wanted it in. And the Greeks, they got their wisdom. They got the Logos, the very wisdom of God, the Logos of God, the Word of God, Jesus Christ, the fount of wisdom itself, the one who arranged the universe. That is the figure in the center of this story. Everything that philosophy has been painstakingly searching for and ruminating on for hundreds of years to that point is found purely, truly, and most potently in the person of Jesus Christ. And the fathers realize this. You read the fathers and you see it. They put it together. They go, this is what we've been looking for. It answers all the questions. It embodies everything that's good about creation and good about the spiritual things. It unites them. We finally have a philosophy that gives us a whole picture of the universe, and it works. It's not just neat little system that's off on the side, but existentially doesn't work out. It actually works, but it didn't come in the package they expected, and it didn't come in the timeline they expected, or from the source they expected. They would have thought it would come from someone like Plato or Socrates, and man, those guys got close maybe, right? But no, it came from a Jewish rabbi in the Middle East, a state that was under Roman oppression and control, that was frankly an upsetting child in that empire. Like, it was always causing problems. Like, that's not where you want that wisdom to come from if you're a Greek, and yet here it is. And when they realize it, again, Roman Empire, once it becomes Christian, both of those sides who are upset by the paradigm of the cross because it opposed what they wanted, what they truly wanted, the good behind what they truly wanted, they get. We get Rome destroyed, but not entirely. It's not reduced to rubble. It's converted and changed from the inside by the power of the gospel. And we get wisdom, not in just prepackaged ideas that can be debated and then not lived out, but in the person of Jesus Christ, who has a jurisdictional claim to the entire universe, including your life and your heart. So in that way, the debater of our age, the wise one, what do they truly want? They want justice and equity among peoples of the earth. Great, we have it. It's in the Catholic faith handed down by the apostles. It's in the person of Jesus Christ. That's certainly not the package you're expecting, is it? Because Christianity's been labeled as patriarchal, oppressive, and this and that, yada yada yada. Do they want, economic prosperity? Well, let's be honest. The principles of the Catholic religion in the economic sphere lay out some guidelines that, subsidiarity, solidarity, like there's the Catholic social teaching principles, and when those have been implemented, they work really well. They make an equitable economic situation for people that's based on the human person, right? Do we want order? What about the one who ordered the universe? There's order. So this paradigm is oppositional, but it's also the answer to the question that the person who it's opposing wants an answer to begin with. And funny enough, the way that we embody it to them is probably not just meeting them on the debate field or coming to them necessarily on their own terms, but sometimes it's being completely foolish and being willing to be destroyed, right? That's what the early church found. And they did debate, they did reason, they did win people over with that, but they also looked wild, right? They looked crazy to people because of what they were willing to put up with, what they were willing to do. They were willing to be tortured, killed, humiliated. They were willing to embody the image of the cross, and that seemed foolish. But that foolishness was the very paradigm-shifting act of the early church in this pattern of this verse that enabled people to see the wisdom behind it, that enabled people to see, oh, actually that thing that I think I want in a Messiah or in wisdom is found in Jesus. That's what I'm thinking about with this verse. Practical steps, I don't know. There's probably a lot of practical steps from just these types of thoughts. Really what it is just a call to be helplessly authentically Catholic, with total reckless abandon. Like, this is the time. This is not the time to be quiet about it. It's also not the time to just boast about it and be annoying either. But it's certainly the time to commit to making a stand, and not just with your words, but in your life. Like, how am I going to live what the church teaches in my own life, whether that's in my marriage and sexuality, or in my work, in my vocational calling, in my interactions with other people. And when they ask me about it, am I willing to be called a fool for that? Because if the answer to that is yes, then very likely those of us who are fools of Christ can be the ones who sow the seeds of all of this turning around and getting better and becoming what Jesus wants it to be. So anyways, those are my thoughts. This is probably already way longer than I wanted it to be, but thanks for watching. Hopefully there was something valuable in this reflection. I'm going to start doing more stuff like this, whether it's just a daily reading that impacted me or just thoughts I have. One series I've been thinking about putting together, Gina, my wife, and I have talked a lot about the paradigms that have to shift for someone to convert from Protestantism to Catholicism. I think I'm going to put together a couple of videos like that, where similar to this, very off the cuff, just discuss some of those paradigms that you have to, that you experience a shift in from Protestant to Catholic, and talk through how those are found in the scriptures and in history and stuff like that. So if you want to see that, or there's other videos you want to see, let me know down in the comments. And I will see you guys next time on Drew the Catholic. Thanks.